Hello everyone and welcome back to the program. Herbert W. Armstrong was one of the most prominent religious leaders of the 20th century. He was watched, read, and followed by millions of people worldwide. At the time of his death in 1986, the news magazine that he founded was produced in 7 languages and had a global circulation of 8.4 million households. On today's show, we'll be offering you a free booklet that pretty well encapsulates what the plain truth was all about for more than 50 years. He was right. It's a remarkable history. The long track record of accurate, predictive analysis outlined in He Was Right will help to build your faith in the absolute certainty of Bible prophecy.
The Trumpet Daily.
For more than 5 decades, Herbert W. Armstrong consistently shouted a warning in print, over the airwaves, about the revival and unification of Germany. He proclaimed that Germany would be the dominant force behind a powerful union of European nation states that would surpass the Russian bloc and even Britain and America in power. Imagine predicting that when Germany lay in rubble after World War II. Well, that's what Herbert W. Armstrong did. Now, Mr. Armstrong didn't live long enough to see the Berlin Wall come down in 1989 or Germany unite the year after that. But many people who studied Mr. Armstrong's teachings were very much alive when these dramatic events started to happen. They were well aware of what Mr. Armstrong had been prophesying all those years. There was even a news director who worked for a television station in Seattle, in the northwestern part of the U.S., who contacted Mr. Armstrong's church following the dramatic news of the wall coming down back in 1989. This is how the Worldwide Church of God reported that exchange. The news director was well aware of the World Tomorrow program and the fact that for more than 40 years, the church had been predicting the reunification of Europe in some form. He asked for on-air comments about whether the church believed the opening of the wall was the commencement of end-time prophetic events. Here was a newsman that wanted to get the church's reaction. Now, at the point that this happened, Mr. Armstrong had been dead for 3 years. And if you know anything about the history of the church after his death, his successors took that church in a very different direction, dramatically different. They did away with a lot of Mr. Armstrong's teachings. They really started to dismantle the work that he built. And it happened so fast. And by the time that this happened, that church had lost its prophetic vision. It had turned away from the truth. It stopped proclaiming God's truth to the world as a witness, as a warning. Notice what the Worldwide News continued to say. We responded that it was premature to make statements like that. The news director was disappointed that we would not proclaim this to be the absolute beginning of end-time events, but it was interesting that he did say that what the church has predicted from the Bible was remarkably close to what appears to be happening. So here was a case where these events that the church had talked about for years, for decades, they were happening. And a news director calls that church and says, "Hey, haven't you been saying this?" And the church officials by that point said, "Well, now let's not overreact. It's not that big of a deal. We don't want you to get carried away with this." What a change. What a dramatic change. Let's start our study today in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 27. Go and get your Bible and read along with me about some of these prophecies that we continue to talk about, even after all of these decades. And here we are, living through them, so many of them now fulfilled, so many others being fulfilled, and others on top of that about to be fulfilled. One can only imagine what Mr. Armstrong would have told that news director had he still been alive at that time. This is Daniel 2, verse 27. Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, "The secret which the king has demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king." Now we're picking it up in the middle here, but Daniel was summoned to come before King Nebuchadnezzar to interpret this dream, this disturbing dream that the king had had. Verse 28 says, "There is a God in heaven that reveals secrets and makes known to King Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days." Daniel went to that king and said, there is a God who knows what's to happen in the latter days. He can reveal those secrets. And that's why Herbert Armstrong's magazine, The Plain Truth, for more than 50 years was so accurate with its analysis, with its predictions, with its prophecies, because there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. Notice verse 30, it says, "But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king." God reveals it. He reveals it in the pages of the Bible. He reveals it for our sake, so that we might know what's to happen in the latter days. Now, why would anyone or any organization turn away from that kind of revealed truth, from that kind of insight, actually being able to look into the future and know what is to happen in the latter days? God lays it all out there for us. Let's go over to the book of Revelation, chapter 17. Revelation 17, of course, you have to put Daniel together with Revelation, the Old Testament together with the New. And I mean, you get the whole picture. It's laid out there for us in such riveting detail. Just a few weeks ago, I gave a program on Bible prophecy, where we are in prophecy. And on that show, I talked about how that a third of the Bible, a third of it, is prophecy. And that's the third that most in the traditional Christian world simply ignore. I brought out on that show how that Jesus Christ's gospel message itself revolved around prophecy. The Apostle Peter talked about the sure word of prophecy. All the disciples, the apostles, spoke of it. Paul, in so many of his writings, talked about just the imminent return of Jesus Christ to this earth and all the events that would precede it. Read 1 Thessalonians. Read the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24. Read the book of Revelation. Read what Peter wrote in his epistles. Read what John wrote about the last hour, or as Jude put it, the last time, coming down even to the point of measuring moments. A third of the book is devoted to prophecy. Well, we don't ignore that third. We don't ignore the other 2/3 either, that have more to do with Christian living and Bible history. We need all of it. We need a complete spiritual diet. But we certainly don't want to go for one or two sections of the Bible and then just ignore or omit the prophetic third, because that's what gives us insight. That's what helps us to see what's coming, what's ahead. Notice Revelation 17 here. In verse 10 it says, "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space." This is really if you just study this verse or this passage together with some commentaries, I can tell you they're going to be confused at the wording here in this verse. It says, "And there are 7 kings." We've talked so often before about the 7 resurrections of the Roman Empire, the so-called Holy Roman Empire. And here John says there's 7, okay, 5 are fallen, so they've come and gone. One is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. It's as if God was giving this to the Apostle John, writing it down through his servant in the first century, so that when it would be revealed later, during that 6th head, one is, but the other's not yet to come. I mean, there would be another servant on the scene in the end time who would be right there during the rise of that sixth resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire, and then not be around when the seventh one came along. Notice what my father had to say in his booklet, Prophesy Again. Mr. Armstrong came at the time when the beast that was and is not and yet is, he was on the scene when the sixth head rose to power before and during World War II, the beast that was. He was also there after the beast lost World War II and is not. That's going back to, I think, verse 8 here in Revelation 17. But it says here, he was still there when the beast went underground and yet is. But also note that the other is not yet come, just like we read there in verse 10. So Mr. Armstrong was prophesied not to be around when the seventh head appeared. It's amazing, isn't it? Just how much detail God gives us about these resurrections of the Holy Roman Empire. Verse 12 here in Revelation 17 continues, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So this verse refers then to the United States of Europe, the seventh and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. Notice what Herbert Armstrong said on his old radio program back in the 1960s.
There will be about 375 million people in the population in this resurrected Roman Empire, in the territory of the old Roman Empire in Europe. About 375 million people. The 17th chapter of the book of Revelation shows it will be a combination of 10 dictatorships in Europe going together. 10 governments or nations in Europe consolidating in the United States of Europe. I don't know whether they'll call it the Roman Empire or not, but that's what it will be.
And so, as he said there, it's by this passage, Revelation 17 and others like it, that we know there's to be 10 heads of state to emerge out of Europe and to come together. Notice what it says in verse 13. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. They have one mind. They're all in this together. It's not a democratic movement by any means, but they do come together for a short time. That's what the Bible says will happen. Now let me take you to what Mr. Armstrong had to say. This is in 1980, and keep in mind as we read this, that this is a full 9 years before, even before the Berlin Wall came down. It says here, it now looks entirely feasible that Yugoslavia may be included in this revived Roman Empire. Also the Pope's native Poland and Romania, and possibly Hungary. Add Austria, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and France. There will be a union of 10 nations in the general area of the medieval Roman Empire. In the new united Europe, probably, he says here, now notice this, probably Holland, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden will not be included. That's talking about the final 10. But Ireland may, Britain will not. He says, I've been forecasting this revived Roman Empire publicly since February 1934. Now it may go together suddenly, rapidly, he says. I've been talking about this since the 1930s. And at the time he gave that quote, that was, as I say, 9 years before the wall came down. That was when the iron fist of the Soviet Union ruled Eastern Europe. And Mr. Armstrong said the East is going to come over to the side of Europe by the time that this union is formed. And did you note there what he said about Britain? Britain won't be in it. And that's happened. As I say, so many of these prophecies are being fulfilled. Lots of this, as I say, is talked about in this wonderful booklet. He was right. He was. This one booklet, it's about 70 pages. It really does encapsulate, as I said at the top of the show, those plain truth issues that spanned a half century. He was right. This brings all of those amazing prophetic statements together. And of course, with respect to Britain not being part of it, you can see that comment, that statement is featured here on the cover of our latest issue of the Trumpet magazine with a quote there that we'll get to coming up here in the next segment. But for now, make sure you jot down the information, the phone number, the text number, whatever it is that you need to request a free copy of He Was Right and to subscribe to the Trumpet magazine. We'll be right back.
To those who followed the broadcasts and writings of Herbert W. Armstrong throughout his long ministry, and who still remember, world events today are an electrifying endorsement of the power of biblical revelation. Much of Mr. Armstrong's forecasting was proven accurate within his own lifetime, but since his death in 1986, events are proving him right all the more. For a comprehensive review of Mr. Armstrong's analysis, request our free booklet, He Was Right. He Was Right summarizes many of the Bible-based prophecies Mr. Armstrong proclaimed for more than 50 years. This booklet takes you back to the spiritual roots of the Philadelphia Church of God and the Trumpet magazine. To assemble the material in this booklet, our staff looked back through decades of old plain truth issues, looking for Mr. Armstrong's bold predictions. We then matched those prophetic statements with what actually happened or is now happening on the world scene. The result was amazing. The sheer number of prophetic statements made by Mr. Armstrong and his editorial team and their accuracy will astound you. The world may scoff, but Herbert Armstrong was right. Just how right is daily becoming apparent as we teeter on the brink of catastrophic global events that will lead to the greatest geopolitical intervention of all time, the return of Jesus Christ to this war-torn, war-weary earth. Email your request to td@kpcg.fm or visit thetrumpet.com.
In that quote I gave you right before the break, you'll recall Mr. Armstrong said Britain won't be part of it. That was from 1980. Let me take you back farther than that. This goes all the way back to 1956, where he said the stage is all set. This is just 11 years after World War II ended. Germany's in rubble. He says the stage is all set. The Germans are coming back from the destruction of World War II in breathtaking manner. Germany is the economic and military heart of Europe. Probably Germany will lead and dominate the coming United States of Europe, but Britain will be no part of it. Britain will be no part of it. Now, how could he know that? As far back as 1956, how could he know about this future United States of Europe, this imperialist Europe dominated by Germany? How could he know that Britain wouldn't be part of it? If you move ahead to the end of his ministry, this is in Mystery of the Ages. He wrote this in the last year of his life, 1985. And he says here, the soon-coming resurrected Holy Roman Empire, a sort of soon-coming United States of Europe, a union of 10 nations, will rise up out of or following the common market of today. And then he references there Revelation 17. As you can see, Britain will not be in that empire soon to come. He made these statements all the way through his ministry, and of course, we picked up with that as soon as we started the Trumpet magazine back in 1990. I mean, now this magazine's been around for 26 years. It's followed in that rich prophetic tradition of the Plain Truth magazine that went right around the world, translated in all those languages. Millions and millions of households subscribed to the Plain Truth. In fact, we've had many readers of the Trumpet now tell us that, well, the reason I'm subscribing to this is it reminds me of the Plain Truth. You write like Mr. Armstrong did back in the day. And that's because we're carrying right on with the same work, preaching the same truth, with the same prophetic vision, led by the same God who reveals secrets. The same God. There is a God in heaven. And He can make known to us what's to happen in the latter days. What is to happen in the latter days? I know that with respect to Brexit, Britain not being part of it, back at our headquarters campus in Edmond, Oklahoma, the day after that happened, well, we had a number of calls from readers of the Trumpet that said, hey, you got it right. Hey, you've been talking about this. We had one lady who heads up a call center for us at another one of our regional offices, not a member of our church, but who called up our office and said, I remember you saying somewhere in the Trumpet that Britain wouldn't be part of it. If you don't mind, can you give me another subscription to that magazine? People congratulating us, and of course, we telling them, there's a God who reveals this. It's laid out in the Bible. God gives us a lot of details. You put Daniel 2 together with Revelation 17, and it's all laid out there. There's a few things we may not fully know or understand, but the framework is all there. The framework is there. There is a God in heaven. Let me now play for you another clip from Mr. Armstrong, because when you think about the emergence of Germany dominating Europe, Britain now out of it, what's next? What happens next? This again is from Herbert Armstrong, one of his television programs from the mid-1980s.
10 nations, the Bible prophecy says, are going to unite in Europe, and they will be probably more powerful than either the Soviet Union or the United States. When all the nations of Europe get together, there will be 10 of them.
Now here again, these clips can just give you a sense of what Herbert Armstrong was saying for decades, what he said all through his ministry. Where do we go from here? What happens next? Now that Britain is out of the European Union. Notice what German Foreign Policy.com had to say after Brexit. It says, Berlin is applying intense pressure in the aftermath of the Brexit to reorganize the EU. Under the slogan Flexible Union, initial steps are being taken to establish a core Europe. This would mean an EU led by a small, tight-knit core of countries, with the rest of the EU member countries being subordinated to second-class status. So that's what we can look forward to next. There is a God who reveals secrets. You watch for the core of 10 to come together. The 10 kings, the 10 nation states. That's what your Bible prophesies. Look, it's been right all the way through. Going back to the fall of the Berlin Wall, all the way through to today. Most recently, Brexit. Now what? What's next? Well, the Bible keeps us informed. Back to Daniel 2. Let's just conclude here in Daniel chapter 2. And we'll read in verse 40. It says, And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. So this is talking about the fourth and final kingdom. This Daniel 2 image represents 4 world-ruling kingdoms. And the thing about the fourth one, the Roman Empire of old has come and gone. But then there's to be 7 resurrections coming out of that same region, the heart of Europe, just like Mr. Armstrong explained. And so here we are in the last days, witnessing the 7th and final resurrection. Verse 41 says, And whereas you saw the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron. For as much as you saw the iron mixed with miry clay, it says, And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. So there's going to be some strength. There's going to be also some struggling, some division, some strife. There's lots of different peoples, languages, interests in that region, but it's going to come together. Now, we read already in Revelation 17 where it says it'll be short-lived. But when it does come together as one mind, like it says in Revelation 17, well, there's a number of other prophecies that talk about what it's going to do during its short reign. Let me just play for you one final clip from Herbert Armstrong. This is from 1982.
But today it becomes a very solemn warning. And now the time is very imminent. The new United States of Europe is on the verge of going together. Now, it has gone together a number of times. Already, 5 times directly and a 6th time that the world hardly noticed. And we're waiting now for the 7th resurrection of the Roman Empire. And the whole world is going to be astounded.
Once it's out there in the open for everyone to see, the whole world's going to be astounded. Like Mr. Armstrong said there in that clip, verse 43, let me read it from the Revised Standard. As you saw the iron mixed with miry clay, so they will mix one with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. Again, it's going to come together for a short time. You put this together with Revelation 17. But now think about these prophecies, the keynote or the signature prophecy of Herbert Armstrong. He talked about the seventh and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire, dominated by Germany, Britain not being part of it, 10 nation states. Well, there are other details that he brought out as well. This confidence-inspiring leader that needs to emerge in Europe, that's yet to come. And then also that union between the state and a universal church. We're going to see that take on front and center here as we proceed also. But it all culminates, doesn't it? It all culminates in this. Verse 44 continues, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. It leads to the coming of Jesus Christ to this earth and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. He was right. Make sure that you request this free booklet today. It's a beautiful booklet. Lots of pictures and illustrations, but especially the truth that's printed in this work. It encapsulates that 52 years of plain truth excellence that so many of us enjoyed back in the day. And also, if you haven't subscribed already, make sure that you subscribe to the Trumpet magazine so that you can get this delivered to your mailbox every month. Free of charge, no cost, no obligation. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again next time.